Hello and welcome everybody to the 6th edition of the TypeScript Berlin Meetup. While this meetup has started in Berlin, we are now able to bring together the global TypeScript community in this online format. My name is Nico, I'm your host today, and I work at a company called Prisma. We are building developer tools with a focus on databases. And if you're interested to learn more about what we do, you can check out more at prisma.io. But today we have the TypeScript meetup, and we'll keep it short and sweet today with two amazing speakers and a raffle where you can win spectacular prizes. So the first speaker that is going to speak to you today is Alex Johansson, also known as KATT, that's KATT, and he's going to present his library in a talk called End-to-End Typesafe APIs with tRPC. And the second speaker then is David Barrat, who is going to introduce a library or a tool called Shelter, which I think has to do with the project that he's working on that's AuthDog. But so far, so good. Before we get into the talks, we would like to learn a little bit more about you, the audience that is watching right now. And for that, we have prepared an interactive poll that you can participate in by either scanning this QR code or by now taking out your phone or opening your web browser and typing in the URL slido.com/TypeScript. So if you do that, I'll give you a couple of seconds. You will see the first slide, the first question, and that is which most closely describes your work. So we want to know, are you a front-end developer? Are you a back-end developer? Would you fancy yourself to be a full-stack developer, or are you a mobile developer? So if you are watching right now, please share this info with us so that we learn a little bit about who's watching. And the cool thing about Slido is that, as you see, it's real time, it's interactive. So we have 9 people who took part already in the poll, 12 people now. So on the top right, you can see the counter. And it seems like the majority of you folks are full stack developers. Then front-end developers, then a couple of back-end developers, and really only a few mobile developers. So we have 12 people. All right, front-end, full stack is catching up with front-end. We have 13 people taking part in the poll. I'll give you a couple more seconds for maybe the last ones who want to submit their response at slido.com/TypeScript. And if there are no more responses coming in, then okay, we have a winner. Seems like the majority of you are full stack developers, then a couple of front-end developers, back-end developers, and only a few mobile developers. Thank you all for participating in this first question. Here comes the next question already. How many years of development experience do you have? 1 to 2 years, 3 to 4 years, 5 to 6 years, or 7 to 8 or 7+ years? So how experienced are you all? All right, there are quite a few people with more than 7 years of experience under their belt. That's not too bad. If I had to count back, I started, I think, only in my first year of university, I started coding, and that is now already 11 years ago. So I would also add the 7+ there. All right, some junior folks joining here. This is awesome. All right, 18 responses so far at slido.com/TypeScript, and the majority of you are really experienced with 7+ years of experience. Then a few of you, or a third of you, 3 to 4 years, and then a couple of people that have 1 and 2 and 5 to 6 years of experience. That is awesome. And the last question for today's poll is coming now. What technologies do you use in your stack? So here you can really just go wild and type in everything that you're using, be it GraphQL, be it REST, be it TypeScript, be it JavaScript. Just like let us know all the good things that you're working with, and we will see what the majority of you here is choosing. And I suspect that when the technologies are rendered via the word cloud here, I would expect that TypeScript probably ends up being the most popular one. And I guess that's just by the nature of today's meetup. But a couple of you are also using GraphQL. Then also a few are actually using Prisma, which of course, working at Prisma makes me very happy. Yeah, you also know that the stuff that we are working on at Prisma, like no matter what we do, TypeScript really is a first-class citizen. So the main tool that we are building at the moment is an ORM that makes it easy for developers to talk to a database. And all the database queries that you're sending with Prisma are actually also entirely type safe. So we value type safety. We love TypeScript, which is also why we're hosting this meetup here. Let me see. Is there some interesting technologies in there? Oh, I see one user, or at least one person that was using Thrift. Thrift, I think, is a very interesting technology that's also for the API layer. And I think, I don't even know for sure, but I think it's somewhat similar to GraphQL in that it gives you a schema for your API, or it lets you describe your data model. Whoever typed that in, feel free to correct me in the YouTube comments right here. gRPC users as well. That's interesting. Then there is one tRPC user. I guess that makes Alex, our first speaker, happy. Or maybe he just typed it himself. And from the mobile folks, we have someone who's using Flutter as well. So that's also interesting. I used to be a mobile developer back in the day. I was working a lot with Swift, actually, before I moved to the web ecosystem, and was happy to find TypeScript there as another way to get type safety. All right. Thank you all for submitting your responses here. I think we can move on to the next slide. And that is our raffle. So in today's raffle, you can win a copy of the Effective TypeScript book by Dan Vanderkam and our sensational Prisma swag. So you see a couple of stickers there on the left that we're happy to ship to you, and then also a Prisma t-shirt. I'm also wearing a Prisma t-shirt right now, but it's a different one. And I'm not sure if we still have that exact model, but if you reach out to us and ask for that, maybe we can ship that instead of just the one with the logo on the left that you also see on the picture on the slide. To enter the raffle, simply fill out the type form that we will drop the link for in the chat. So just click the link that is coming up now and fill out the type form, and then you automatically participate in the raffle. And by the end of this meetup, we'll actually randomly select the winner, and I'll announce it at the end. And with that, it is time to introduce our first speaker. And that is Alex. Alex is a Swedish full-stack TypeScripter who has developed the library tRPC based on a proof of concept by Colin, who also made the Zod library. I think Zod is a TypeScript validation library, if I'm not mistaken. He has been coding for over 15 years and is currently the CTO and co-founder at the startup tradebay.co. And with any further delay, I bring you Alex.
Hey, what's up?
Hey, Alex. Nice to see you. I'm really excited about your talk. And in fact, we just talked before the stream. I think you have been a longtime member of the Prisma community, and even before that, of the GraphQL community, which was the company that we had before we turned into Prisma. So it's great to have you on the stream. And yeah, the stage is yours.
All right. I guess now it's there. Yeah, so I'm Alex. I'm here to talk about TypeScript and end-to-end typesafe APIs. So the structure of the talk that I will be going through is, first, I'll do some intro and background and how I ended up doing a tRPC and who I am and some motivations and code snippets. And then I'll go do some live coding or show the coding live. Show some examples that we have on tRPC, and then we'll do conclusion, some questions and answers, which will probably be the majority of the talk. I hope people have some questions, and I can do some more live coding after that. So quickly about me, I'm the co-founder and CTO of a startup called TradeBay. On GitHub, I'm KATT, that's Swedish for cat, the cat, I mean. And on Twitter, you can find me on alex.js. I've been working with websites for a really long time. I started in the LAMP stack in the 2000s, but I've been working primarily with JavaScript and Node since 2011 or something like that. Also worked as an iOS developer, and in my JavaScript career, I used to be a really JavaScript cowboy, but nowadays I really love type safety. But we're not here to talk about me, so we're here to talk about JavaScript. So everyone in this call probably recognized this quote, and it's just really true for me, because I decided a few years ago that I will use TypeScript for everything unless there's a really good reason not to. And that is not because JavaScript or TypeScript is the best language, but it's a good language that you can use for everything. And that leads to less context switching, smaller team silos, and better productivity. And JavaScript has gotten a lot of good parts since Douglas Crockford's book, JavaScript, the good parts. So let's talk about TypeScript, because I use TypeScript everywhere. And the problem I've been facing a lot that you can solve with like using GraphQL and code generation, or Swagger schemas with code generation, or declaring explicit like API contracts or schemas, is that as soon as you do a request from a client to a server, you kind of lose the type safety of that, even if you use TypeScript on both ends. So I'll go through a bit of the process on how I ended up finding tRPC and working a lot with it. So, I started this product at this company about a year ago, and I really love GraphQL, so that was sort of an obvious choice to build a stack with GraphQL. But I also wanted to get up and running quickly, and Prisma was still in beta. So I ended up with a stack which was like Hasura and React and Create React app. Still using TypeScript everywhere, so a lot of GraphQL code generation and stuff. And as I'm sure all of the folks at Prisma knows really well, there's a lot of trade-offs with using backend as a service. It makes stuff that is already simple really hard, and stuff that is hard harder. So like continuous integration, when you have a backend as a service system, gets really complicated. You have to have different deployments that talk to each other. Same way when you actually deploy the app, if you want a lot of quickly get up a new environment or whatever. And Hasura has some limitations, and I've been stuck with quite a few bugs that's annoyed me as well. So I got to a point where I kind of wanted to build my own GraphQL server. I've done quite a few of those before. But then again, I'm still sort of, even if I've been working with JavaScript and Node for 10 years, I kind of still miss my PHP days when I could just write a database query next to my front end code and just render that straight out. And I feel like this sort of created a lot of internal battles for me, because I've been a big advocate for GraphQL for many years, and I still am. But for the application we're doing, it's sort of a web app. And I feel like if there's a web app and one consumer, there might be easier ways to do things. So there's there's a few different alternatives out there already. There's Blitz, and there's, what's the other one? Redwood, and some others as well, I think. And I tested Blitz, and I also contributed a bit to both Blitz and SuperJSON. And the thing I really found amazing with Blitz is the sort of zero API data layer that they have. And the rest of the stuff I don't really care that much about, but the zero API data layer is really amazing. And I stumbled on a proof of concept made by Colin, where that really amazed me. He created a server router where he exported the types of that router and then imported those types on the front end, and could, in a type-safe way, fetch and put data up and down from the front end to the back end without any code generation involved. So I'm going to show you a bit how tRPC looks like in the current form. So I'll start with a vanilla example that doesn't use any React or anything, just HTTP fetch. So on the left here, you can see we have a tRPC server. So we create a router with a query called hello, and we return some data from that. We don't have to define any interface, any API schemas or whatever. And then we export the type of that router. And it's important to note here that we export the type and not the whole route, not the whole object, because if you export the type, everything, there won't be any code actually imported on the client at runtime. It will only be for the compilation of TypeScript. So what we can do when we sort of export the type of a full route like this is that if we create a tRPC client here and do the query, which is the hello query, we can get both auto-completion on the query name and inferred output straight from the server without having any sort of code generation, any schemas or whatnot. So you can basically just write code on the back and the front end and use it over the wires, kind of like you're in the same project. And it's not tied to any specific library like React, even though I will talk about React in a bit. It doesn't have any dependencies. It's just using the browser fetch. And yeah, because you can start using it. But the sort of counterparts of this for React look something like this. So the tRPC React library is a type-safe wrapper around React query. So you have all the functionality that you are familiar with in React query. And it works with Create React App, Next.js, and you can even use the React Native. And there's adapters for Next and Express, and helpers for doing like server-side rendering and static site generation. So I'm going to show some coding. Hopefully this will work. So like I showed you in the project before, first of all, the project I'm about to show you here, you can find that in the trpc.io/docs and then in the example apps. And it's this vanilla standalone server that we're going to start using first, where I used to show how it looks like when you're using it. So here's an app router.
Quick note, Alex, I'm not sure if we're supposed to see you code right now, but at the moment
I forgot about switching screens.
Happened to me a couple of times before.
Yeah,
don't worry about it.
Sorry. Apologies about that. Thanks for interrupting me, Nikolas. So the example I'm going to show you, you can go to the docs and then example apps, and you have the code here, and there's a code sandbox links as well. So I have that set up already on my laptop. So if we go to VS Code, you can see here that we have an app router that has a query called hello. And on the, I'm just going to show this running. On the right here, we have the client, and that gets a type-safe hello response. And if I just going to show you to how, when you write a query, you get automatic type safety or type inference, so you get auto-completion. And also you see that this has an optional ZOB schema defined. So here, in any sort of query that you defined in your tRPC server needs, in order for it to get input data, you need to define this validation schema for it. So in this example here, I'm using ZOD, but tRPC works with YUP as well. So this route or procedure is is accepting one argument with a subschema that has an object that has a name, but it's set as optional. So I can query this without passing any input, and you see the stuff is inferred. And if I create an object here and do control space, I can get the types that are on the input object. So if I change the type of this, for instance, we will see straight away that we get type errors because I'm trying to assign a number to a string, and this is passed the whole way through. And we have support for both mutations and queries. So query and mutation looks exactly the same. Internally, there's no difference. The main difference is that, and I mean, the only real difference is that the mutations are done over HTTP post, and the queries are made over HTTP GET. So the queries are really easy to cache and stuff like that. So you can see here when I save this, you have I have a node watcher here that runs this, and you can see that I get a create response from the mutation. So yeah, I'm going to see, was there anything more I want to say with this? No. So that's a basic sort of vanilla example of how to use tRPC. And now I'm going to show you a full stack Next.js example, because we can do this with React as well. So the next example I'm going to use is this Next.js starter with Prisma, because we're at the Prisma meetup. So I prepared this today, just before. So if you want to play around with tRPC, the best way to start is just to go to tRPC and the example labs and use the quick start on the example. So this one, just do this and copy it in. I have already done that, so I didn't have to wait a minute for NPM to be done. So here we have a Prisma starter. And the first thing to note is the file structure. We have a Prisma, and everything looks like a traditional Next.js application. I think like most people are in this meetup are probably familiar with Next.js. And so you have the pages, and you have the normal things you see with Next.js. And one thing to note here is the posts route that I've created here. Here I have created a new router that I call a post router with a mutation add. There's a create example, there's a read example, update and delete. And in the context, I have passed in Prisma, which is generated with this schema. So we have a post that has a title and a text that I've generated. And the only thing that tRPC sort of exposes to as an API route is an API response handler that is in the API/tRPC/brackets tRPC. And in this file, you just export a next API handler with your root router, and you can then merge other routers on that. So you can structure your code and do a lot of different sub routers. So I'm going to show you how this sort of starter app looks like. So I've started this with Yarn DX, which gives me both Prisma Studio and tRPC. So when we use this, reload the page, you can see that we first do a post.all request. In my app, I have done a use query of post.all, and then I further down just loop through the posts that have been created, and even further down we just do a little form with the mutation. So if I add some posts here, you can see what happens. I get a 400 response here because something is too small. There's even in tRPC you can also get this sort of error arrow formatting, typesafe as well. But there's a section of that in the docs that I'm not going to go through today. And yeah, you can add a post. And you see here that first there's an HTTP post to post.add /API/tRPC/post.add, and then we fetch the new post. And everything that you can see here is type safe and inferred straight from your router. So if I go to the post and try to send, for instance, a number instead of a string here, we will get an error, a type error that we're using the same, the wrong format, the wrong shape of the input, which is pretty cool. So it makes it really simple and fast to write API routes and just using them straight away in the client. And I want to show one last thing on the Next.js bit. So when I reload here, I'll do it with 3G instead. You'll see that I just have a 1 second delay here. You'll see that we have a loading and then we show the post. Wouldn't it be nice if we could just get this server rendered? And in tRPC, there's two different ways of doing that. Either you can use the things that are commented out in the page's index file, and you can use the static props, and there are some helpers in tRPC where that helps you prefetch queries and then load them into React Queries cache and then have them rendered before. Or you can go to the app and just go to, I'm not going through everything in how the project is set up, but basically we have a high order function on the app that sort of adds the magic of tRPC to the app. And you pass in configuration both for the server and the client. And if I just enable SSR in this bit here and reload this page or disable JavaScript, we can get the same page working without JavaScript, which is pretty cool. Or if you like statically rendered site, you can do that instead as well. So this would have been a lot easier if I had an audience where I could ask questions. But that is sort of the DX, if you will, of tRPC with Next. And there's a lot more features. I'm going to share my other screen now because I have a few more slides. I'm not going to forget to do that now. Stop screen, and I will share my slides again. Tab. We have that here. So there are some more features that I haven't covered. You can add middleware to router similar to in Express or whatever. You can do type safe error handling and formatting. There's data transformers. So if you have, for instance, a date field and you want to pass that out of wire, you can add super JSON to just transparently use a date object from the server to the client and the other way around. There's experimental subscription support. And there's a lot of query helpers specifically for React, like paginated queries and typesafe optimistic updates and typesafe query invalidation. And another good question is, should you use tRPC? And my answer for that is, like, if you're a full stack TypeScripter and you're doing a web app and you don't have any consumers that aren't written in TypeScript, it's really nice to use. If you have a GraphQL API already and you have set up your code generation and all that, it's probably not going to add too much benefit for you. Or if you're a big team with silos or need a really super well-documented API it might not be for you either. But it would be really fun to if anyone would check it out. So some asks. Since a few months ago, I've been quite obsessed with working on this library. But if this talk enticed you to look into it more, I'd love to have some help on it. If you're a TypeScript wizard, there's a lot of open issues on GitHub that aren't issues, they're more like feature requests that are labeled TypeScript wizardry. If you're good at design, it would be nice with some prettier examples. And if you use like Svelte or Vue, I'd love to make some adapters for them too. So just get in touch. So yeah, that's it of my presentation. Do you have any questions?
That was a really, really nice talk, Alex. I learned a lot. Questions we'll be taking through YouTube comments right now, and so far there are none. In fact, for me, Alex, I had 3 questions throughout the talk, but literally your last slide explained them all. So like, I was wondering if you were planning to support like real-time functionality with this at some point. You said that this is like in an experimental mode at the moment with subscriptions. I did wonder about the specific use cases and like when it would be good and like not to use and like not good to use. You touched on that as well. And the one question that was not 100% answered, but like 90%, will this work in a React Native environment? Well,
yes.
Yeah, so probably as soon as it's using TypeScript, I guess it would work with React Native as well.
Yeah, so the React Query works with React Native. I haven't tested this myself, but I haven't added anything onto React Native that makes it so that it shouldn't work. But as long as you have a monorepo sort of setup with your backend and your app, and you should be able to import the tRPC route and create the tRPC client straight in the React Native app as well.
Right. Yeah, super interesting. We have one question from Nemo. So if I understand correctly, as long as the return type of the route resolver can be inferred, that type will be known to the client?
Yeah, that's correct, yeah. As long as you define a type in the backend, or define a type, or it can automatically be inferred on your backend, it will also be inferred the same on the client.
Cool. Maybe one last question still from like my end. You touched on this very, very briefly, but like when you looked at Blitz, like what was it that kind of triggered you to build your own library, and what were you still missing from Blitz here?
Like, I'm not sure if I want to use React forever.
Okay,
it's one of the reasons, and I want to create a React Native app as well. So yeah, it's sort of like a full-fledged framework, and I already had an app that was built in Create React App, and I just wanted to add this sort of superpower of the Blitz. But one of the big motivators for working with tRPC is just it's been so fun to work on. Like, it's been super challenging. I feel like I have a PhD in TypeScript generics by now, because it's using a lot of crazy template literal strings and stuff that wasn't even possible to do 6 months ago, or a bit more than 6 months ago at least.
Yeah, it's really nice. Like TypeScript is becoming more and more powerful, and it has a lot of very nice features that if you leverage it properly, or if you leverage them properly, they can really, really improve the developer experience. And I think you're on a great track there with tRPC. So I'm definitely excited to see where this is going. Yeah, thank you so much for the talk, Alex.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. One more question.
Permissions. It's through. So every incoming request can create a context on its own. So you can create a context for each. You create the context for each incoming request, and there you can access the sort of request headers or whatever. And then you create a context object that will be passed down to all of the resolvers. So it's similar to how you would do in sort of GraphQL Apollo land.
All right, perfect. then I think that was the last question that we had to answer here. And thank you so much for joining us today, Alex.
Thank you.
All right. That was a great talk from our first speaker, Alex. And before we move on with the second talk, I just quickly want to bring your attention to an upcoming conference, and that's Prisma Day. Prisma Day is happening in a month from now on June 29th and June 30th. On June 29th, we'll have a day full of workshops. So there is going to be an introductory workshop to Prisma. So if you've never worked with Prisma, if you have no idea what it is, then you can join this workshop for free. And we will also host a number of workshops with the same content, but in different languages. So if you're not super comfortable speaking English, and if you maybe prefer to have the workshop in your native language, there is a good chance that we will actually host the workshop in your native language and that you can join that for free. So that's the first kind of workshop that you can attend. The second workshop will be about backend development with Prisma, and we are at the moment planning 3 workshops there. One is going to be with Nest.js, where you are going to learn how to build a REST API with Prisma. Another one is a GraphQL workshop, and the third one is actually a full stack workshop with Next.js and Prisma. And finally, the third kind of workshop that you can attend is about different frameworks that are built on top of Prisma, like Redwood.js, Application, Wasp. So there are a number of interesting developer tools that are choosing Prisma as their default ORM, and all of these will be taught at Prisma Day. And then on June 30th, we'll have a number of speakers from different companies and also, of course, from Prisma itself. You can sign up already on prisma.io/day. Moving on, I also want to point your attention to a Udemy course. If you want to learn about Prisma and how to build a full stack application with Prisma, you can sign up on Udemy for this course. It's called End-to-End React with Prisma 2. And you can access it for free by using the code end-to-end-May26. And that code will give you a 100% discount on the price of the course, and it will be active for the next 3 days. So you can purchase that or get that course for free for the next 3 days with this discount code. The link for that is also in the chat right now. And also, one more thing that is coming up tomorrow is our new meetup, Connect Dev Africa, which is a space to connect with other developers and developer communities within Africa, learning, showcasing awesome products they are working on, and grow the African developer community. It is actually organized by our own developer advocate, Alex, and you can join the first session already tomorrow. There will be 3 speakers at the event. Gift Egwinyu will tell us about personal branding for software engineers. Kenny Easy with his presentation titled Building Large Sites on the Jamstack with On-Demand Builders. And then again, our own developer advocate Mahmoud is going to present the beginner's guide to GraphQL. And again, you can find the link for that meetup in the chat right now. And now we can move on. Before we move on to the next talk and the last talk, I'd like to remind you that you can still join our Raffle by simply filling out the type form, and you can win a copy of the Effective TypeScript book and our Prisma swag. And now we are finally coming to our second and last speaker for today, and that is David Barrat. He's a data engineer, and he started AuthDog, a security IAM platform, as a side project. It's not yet publicly available. In his spare time a couple of years ago. And today he's talking about Shelter, which is an AuthDog service. Let's bring David to the stage. Hey, David, it's great to have you here. Right now, I don't think I can hear, or like I cannot hear you yet. I don't know.
Hello.
Yeah, there we go. Oh, actually, now you're gone again. Now
Is
you're
it better?
Yes.
Hello?
Now I can hear you. Hey, David. So what is AuthDog? Maybe you can just give a quick explanation of that before you get into the talk.
Yeah, so AuthDog is originally a side project that I've created for handling authentication, authorization needs for other projects. And one day I decided to turn it into a real project. So
Nice.
spending some time to make something quite professional. But unfortunately, it's not yet released. And I would like to spend more time on the documentation, which is a pain.
Yeah, the documentation, that's always a big topic for sure. All right, yeah, I'm excited about the talk. The stage is yours, David.
Cool. So here's today's agenda for the session. So first, I will give you a bit of introduction on what's AuthDog. Then I will come back to Shelter. Then I will give you an introduction on what's fine-grained authorization compared to role-based access control, the motivation behind Shelter, how Shelter works, then Collar, and finally, a very quick demo. So what's AuthDog? So AuthDog is an identity and access management SaaS platform, which is designed to be cloud agnostic, serverless. So it's built with TypeScript. It's running within AWS Node.js 12 runtime. It's a one-stop shop for configuring everything related to security for application, API, device, and so on. Everything that can talk to an API can basically work with AuthDog. It has a flexible and granular permission management system. So I will come back later to these specific features. It has a user-friendly UI. And it's built with TypeScript, React, Redux, NX, serverless framework, GraphQL, Apollo, and many good things. And unfortunately, it's not yet ready for an IPO, but one day. So what's Shelter? So Shelter is a centralized store for authorization as a service designed to solve scalability-related issues. And I will explain why it's an issue afterwards. It's built with TypeScript, serverless framework, so same as the technology already used for building the core of AuthDog. It uses native FaunaDB operators to construct the logic upon the tuples. So it uses union, intersect, and exclude, and things like that to combine existing tuple into more complex logic. So Shelter is like AuthDog cloud agnostic. It can operate on AWS, Azure, GCP, Kubernetes, and so on. And it's empowered by other fine-grained authorization projects like Zanzibar from Google, Udemy for Airbnb, Keto, and Sandcastle from O0. And I took inspiration from open article online. And Keto is actually open source. So fine-grained authorization versus coarse authorization. So what's the difference and what are the benefits of using fine-grained authorization? So fine-grained authorization enables object-level security and information sharing. For instance, access control lists. So below, to have an example, John can read folder A, Alice can read folder A, Bob can read folder B, and David can read and write /user/has-been. That's an example of access control list. The problem is it doesn't necessarily scale because if this definition I've written in a file, it's very difficult to mutate them or update them at scale. But it gives more flexibility than role-based access control. So there is an example where rollback can be an issue. So John has sysadmin role. He can read-write folder /user-bin. Bob requests write access to /user-bin folder, but he doesn't have the sysadmin role. So should we give access to Bob to the /user-bin by giving the sysadmin role to Bob? Probably not. So the motivation behind Shelter were to build a low latency authorization store, increasing authorization flexibility inspired by Google Zanzibar tuple notation, adopting a more scalable solution by storing authorization data as tuple in a cache to mitigate unnecessary round trips to a relational database, keeping TypeScript as main language to compile safely to Node.js. And Node.js is, I think, maybe not the case anymore, but it used to be the shortest cold start on AWS. And it gives as well the ability to write isomorphic app to use TypeScript, because you can compile to JavaScript, and JavaScript can be executed on the client and the server. So here is the current architecture for HostDoc, for AWS at least. So all the authorization are stored in Aurora, which is replicated within a VPC. We use Lambda Node.js runtime. All the functions are stored in S3. We use API gateway for exposing the endpoints, platform for caching the function, Route 53 for managing the routing and the DNS, and CloudWatch for logging the events. So the problem with this approach is that we do have too many operations happening directly to the Aurora store. And even if it's replicated, it has limitation. We can't have as much client as we want supported, and the CPU will won't have enough power for supporting all the requests. So a solution for solving this issue is to delegate the read operation to Shelter, which is an isolated service, which can be hosted on AWS or Azure and so on. And it relies on FaunaDB for storing the relationship and helping scaling the requests coming from the internet. So all read operation can be delegated to this Shelter store, in a sense that you can rely on this piece to authorize other services in your stack. And the goal is to make it available via HostDoc to any application registered in HostDoc for authorization. So how Shelter works. So Shelter is a serverless platform written in TypeScript, and it's providing a few services. So there is two simple services. So there is a check service, which is checking if the tuple is allowed, and write tuple, which is writing a tuple in the store. So for instance, check is receiving a specific object, which is described by namespace object ID. That could be, for instance, recipe. Object ID can be lasagna. Then you do have hashtag ration, which can be a role or permission, and @ will be a prefix to the principal, which can be the user or the subject. So you can combine this kind of notation with operands, like union, intersect, or exclude, and you can make even more complex relation by combining multiple tuples. So I've written a prototype of a library called Collar, which is supposedly a wrapper for the Shelter API. And technically it's taking a tuple for the check function. It's taking a tuple as a parameter, and the tuple is defined with a TypeScript syntax. So you can see there that iShelter tuple is a combination of multiple simple types. iShelter object identifier, which has two field namespace and object ID. iShelter relation identifier, which has UID and relation ID. And iShelter principal identifier, which has principal namespace, principal ID, and principal relation. But all these will be documented, but this is just to give you some context. So this function takes a tuple as parameter, and it's returning the outcome of the endpoint /API v1 read check. So now I would like to move to the demo. So to give you an example, Alice has created a lasagna recipe. So Alice is the author of the lasagna recipe. Bob has to review the recipe, so it would be like a contributor. So Alice requests an admin to add Bob to change its authorization to view the recipe as contributor. And after that, we would like to add David as a chef to share his feedback about the recipe. So creating 3 tuples. So this is a reference for my presentation. And I can come back to the app for giving you the demo. Okay, so this is an example of recipe. It's a protected view. Let's go back to VS Code. So as you can see, there is a verify authorization, which is invoking caller check. And in caller check, we're passing the relation ID, namespace, object ID, relation ID, and principal ID, which is describing a tuple. So in that case, we are checking if Alice, author of lasagna recipe, is allowed to see the recipe. So if we change that to Bob, we save. So it says you're not allowed to see that recipe because in Shelter there is no corresponding relationship. So we would like to give access to Bob as a contributor. So let's check first if Bob is allowed as a contributor. As you can see, you are not allowed to see that recipe. So there is a form below the recipe that's to demonstrate the capability to create a tuple, but normally that won't be described this way. So let's create a relation contributor. The principal will be the user, Bob. Operand will be union. In the future, you will have more operand supported. So let's create a tuple. So I've created a new relationship, which is associated to author with a union. Actually like that. So you do have the first tuple and this tuple we just created, and both are associated with union. Let's come back to, okay. So now if we are refreshing the page, we should see the recipe if I didn't make any typo. Okay, so I'm logged as Bob, and now I can see the recipe. And I would like to give access to David to share the feedback about what he thinks about the recipe. So create a new relation chef. Principal will be David, and operand will be union. So that will make a union of the 3 tuple. Create a tuple. So a new tuple has been created. So now you can change the relation chef. Principal ID will be David. And now refreshing, we can see the recipe. And assuming now we remove one of the relationship which are associated, for instance, we remove this one, come back to the app. So this is corresponding to David as chef. Refresh. And it says that I'm not anymore allowed to see the recipe. So that's it for the demo. Feel free to ask any question if you have some.
All right. Thank you so much for the talk, David. There aren't any questions in the chat right now. And I can only say for myself that your demo made me hungry, and it's dinner time here in Berlin. So I think if there are no other questions, I think we can let you go. Thank you so much again for coming on today and sharing about much info about AuthDog and about Shelter. Thank you, David. All right, I am going to share my screen again because there is only one thing that is standing between you and your dinner, or me and my dinner, and that's the winner of the raffle. we are ready to announce the winner now. So we entered all the folks that have submitted the type form into a randomizer, and the winner is Richard M. Congratulations, Richard. You're the winner of the Effective TypeScript book and the Prisma swag, and we're going to reach out to you via the email address that you provided. And that's really all for today. Thank you all, and see you next time.